Welcome everyone to Special Education Legal Fund's February 2nd webinar, Getting Past the Sticker Shock, Therapeutic Special Education Schools. My name is Christine Lai. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Special Education Legal Fund. And I am so pleased to welcome all of our participants, our panelists this evening, and everyone who's joined us for this really interesting, I think, and insightful discussion. It's going to be a really interesting discussion. Just a few housekeeping items before we really get going. First of all, SELF would like to thank our corporate sponsors for their support of the Parent Education Program webinars. This month's webinar, this February's webinar, really concludes the first year of our corporate sponsorship program. And when we started SELF, we were committed to leveling the playing field for families in need with children in the special education system. But what we learned through this process and in the intervening 4 years is that we don't know what we don't know about special education, about legal and advocacy issues, and also about educational options for our children. So our corporate sponsorship program allows SELF to bring these webinars to you and hopefully provide you with knowledge, information, and resources to help you in your child's educational journey. We are deeply grateful to our corporate sponsorship partners, beginning with Winston Preparatory School, with whom we've had a very long-term supportive relationship that goes back to before we were founded. We are also incredibly thankful for American School for the Deaf and Chapel Haven Schliefer Center for their steadfast support of our mission. We've been blessed to have the support of the Pinnacle School and the Spire School, as well as Fusion Academy, Villa Maria, and Hubbard Day School for over the past year of our corporate sponsorship program. If there are any independent schools that are on this call and are interested in the corporate sponsorship program and hearing more about it, please send me an email. I will put my email in the chat momentarily. So my commercial's done for the evening. Our mission, Special Education Legal Fund, in case you are not familiar with us, our mission is to provide resources and knowledge to families in need with children in the special education system. We were founded in 2018 to provide grants for families in need with children in that system. And since our founding, we've provided over $430,000 in grants for legal support from qualified special education attorneys and advocates to over 100 families across 40 school districts in Connecticut and Westchester County, New York. And actually, in the interest of full disclosure, one in Massachusetts as well. Our next webinar, our webinar from March, is Understanding Residential Outplacement. And so we're super pleased that we can actually build on tonight's webinar and the knowledge base that we're putting out there tonight. We're going to discuss the ins and outs of special education school outplacement and special education residential school outplacement. These are always some of our most popular webinars in the series. And we're really excited to welcome Paul Barger, Meredith Braxton, Jerry McMahon, and Piper Paul to discuss this really important topic. I'm just going to take 2 seconds to talk about our legal assistance program for any parents on the line who might be interested in applying to this program. This is our flagship program, our core program, which provides families in need with up to $5,000 in legal support from a qualified special education attorney. If you are interested in beginning the application process or looking for more information about it, please visit our website. The website is at the bottom and it's the programs page of that website, www.spedlegalfund.org/programs. Just to talk really quickly about the requirements for the program, applicants to this program are below 300% of the federal minimum poverty level. On the right side of your screen, you can see the 300% column, which should indicate to you the level at which, if your income falls below that rightmost column, then you might be a candidate for this program or available to apply to this program. Your applicant should also have a current individualized education plan, an IEP, and you should reside in Connecticut or Westchester County, New York. Go to the website that I had referenced previously to initiate the pre-screening process. The process, it's a 4-step process. We review grants every month, essentially through the whole of the school year through June. It starts with a pre-screening, which is 4 questions on our website. If you meet the pre-screening guidelines, you'll receive an application, which you have to fill out and return to me. Applications need to be returned by the 15th with documentation. And then the required parent interview must be completed by the 22nd of each month. The last week of the month is set aside for committee review, and then all applicants are notified by the end of each month. So here we are. I would love to, I'm really excited for this, for tonight's webinar, as I said, and I'm also really, really excited to welcome Julie Smallwood to our panel. This is her first webinar for self. So I know it's going to be a good one. She is a longtime member of the Glen home community, having been on the admissions staff for 12 years and part of the Glen home family for 17. We're so excited to welcome her as the Director of Enrollment for Glen Home this evening and hear her perspective on therapeutic schools, programs, and helping families. Dr. Tammy Moscrip is our next, actually really the next person in my presentation. Dr. Moscrip, but this is, I think your second appearance on a self webinar, so we're really excited to welcome you back. Tammy's role as executive director of the Spire School in Stamford, and her, as well as her background in psychology and in social work, gives her really, really unique perspective on therapeutic special education schools and what we're going to talk about this evening. So welcome back, Tammy. Our next panelist is from Shrub Oak International School, Lauren Koffler has guested on a few previous self panels, I think. Is this your second or third? I don't even remember. We're super excited to have her back. Shrub Oak is a school that I have a real soft spot for because we kind of started at the same time. And so I've been really, we've been really excited to watch its progress and see it grow over the course of the last few years as a really valuable resource for families and for students with autism in this area, in the kind of Fairchester area. So welcome back, Lauren. And last, but certainly not least, we are welcoming special education attorney Dana Johnson to the panel. Dana is actually one of my favorite people that I've met in the self journey. I guess you could call it. This is her second panel, I guess. And Dana
I showed up for. I missed
I don't even know. And Dana is, yeah, exactly. And Dana is a passionate and dedicated advocate for children with disabilities. And one of my favorite things about Dana is that she walks the walk as well as talking the talk. She's a parent that's walked the same path as a lot of us have walked, and for her own children and for the multiple foster children that she's had the privilege to support over the years. So welcome, Dana. We're really excited to hear your perspective on all of this stuff. This wouldn't be a legal webinar without a disclaimer. This webinar is presented for informational purposes only. This webinar is intended as a resource for families who are navigating the special education system in Connecticut or New York, and is not intended to provide legal support, advice, or assistance to any particular individual, nor is it intended to replace the advice or counsel of a qualified special education attorney. This webinar should not be construed as an endorsement by Special Education Legal Fund or any of its representatives of any of the participating panelists in the webinar. For webinar participants, this panel should be viewed as a public forum. Please do not ask questions via the Zoom platform, either in the Q&A or the chat, about your child or your child's legal or educational situation in this forum. Please try to email questions to me at christine@spedlegalfund.org. Please try to refrain from any comments that include identifiable information about your child, including their name, their grade, their school, or their school district. Please remember that your screen name may be visible to the participants in this panel, as well as the panelists in Special Education Legal Fund. This webinar is being recorded and may be distributed or shown at a later date at the discretion of Special Education Legal Fund. So, getting past the sticker shock. So what is a therapeutic special education school? That's the question. I would love for the three of you that are school representatives to maybe start with a 2-minute sort of elevator, an elevator summary of your school and your program, just to kick us off for the evening. Julie, since you're, this is your first time, why don't you go first?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine, for having us. We're really happy to be a part of this group. So the Glen Home School is a therapeutic boarding school. We are located in Washington, Connecticut, a small town in the northwest corner of Connecticut. We work with students ages 10 through 21 who are in grades 5 through 12. We also have a small transition program for students who are not quite ready to launch. We work with students who are struggling with anxiety, depression, mood issues, as well as about 50% of our students are on the spectrum, very high functioning, college bound, but really struggling socially. We really have a very individualized approach to both education and therapy. And so that word is you're probably going to hear me say that word multiple times. So just be aware. So really our goal is to work with the students to build their social skills, to build their healthy living skills, to build their independence. And so through both a behavioral approach, so we're really teaching the students replacement behaviors for those maladaptive behaviors that are not so socially appropriate, and also through the therapeutic approach. And we really approach it through a sort of holistic approach. We're really treating the whole child. And it's a wraparound approach. Everybody that works with that student, from the person that works in the dining hall to the person that's their therapist, is well aware of their specific individual goals and their individual behaviors that they're working on. I think one of the things that sets Glen Home apart is the in the moment coaching, both social skill coaching and strategies or coping skill coaching. And that's really the guts of the work that we're doing, is happening in real time. We're dealing with issues in real time. We're providing students with feedback in the moment so that they can really start to generalize those that feedback and those skills that they're working on. Tell me when 2 minutes is up.
That's perfect. I actually am not timing at all.
Okay.
We're not like official like that.
Okay. Okay. I'll just say just two more quick things about the academics is very individualized. So we're meeting the student where they are academically with a customized schedule so that we can challenge them in areas they need challenge and remediate those areas they need to sort of bring up to speed. We look and feel very much like a traditional school, and that's on purpose. We want them to have access to all of the same things they might at any school. So we have 4 competitive sports teams. We have a huge arts program. We have horses. We have a pool. We have a dance studio. So they can start to engage in activities that they may have engaged in the past, but have sort of put it to the side and are not so engaged in the world anymore. So that's my quick version.
That's the spiel. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, do you want to go next? You're actually, I just realized, as we talk about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, the sort of, residential today spectrum as well. So you're our day school representative. And I guess, Lauren, you kind of, have both types of students, so you can talk to both, both programs. But, Tammy, would you like to go next and talk about Spire, which is a great program that I've been privileged to get to know really well in the last, year and a half?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine, for having me this evening. Yeah, absolutely. So the Spire School is a therapeutic day school. We're located in Stamford, Connecticut. We serve students in grades 6 through 12, co-ed. We are both NEAS accredited and state approved as a special education school. So that state approval is really important because it means that local public school districts can outplace students with IEPs to a therapeutic day environment, ours at Spire in Stamford.
IEP, which Dana will talk about,
individualized, yes, education plans. I'm sure Dana will get into all the nitty gritty of that. So our student profile is really a student who is very capable academically. We have a college prep environment. In fact, it's really important that we maintain the academic rigor. And I think that's one of the unique features of Spire, is that we're focused on building confidence and empowerment and skills in our students by maintaining academic robustness and developing those skills. But even though our students typically are, experiencing anxiety, depression, executive function skill challenges, a lot of school avoidance, bipolar, borderline symptoms, a lot of ADHD. So the idea is that they're coming into small group classes. We're a small school, 65 students. So there's small group classes of about 4 to 6 students in a classroom. They're working with both subject area and special education certified faculty. So it was important for us that we don't, even though we are a special education school, that we don't just have a special ed team, because it was important that we could teach those high level courses, those AP calculus, the UConn ECE classes, to really be able to challenge those students who derive a sense of confidence and competence from succeeding in the classroom that can then infiltrate other areas, perhaps, that they have less confidence. So our students are really working hard in the classroom, and then our teachers are collaboratively working with our group of clinicians whom we call life coaches. Mm-hmm. And that's another unique feature at the Spire School. Life coaches are really working with the students in small groups. They have one-on-one life coaching, as well as running 4 groups throughout the week. They have small caseloads, anywhere from 6 to 8 students. Half our team are school social workers. The other half are school counselors. Our school counselors are also working on those transition goals and career planning and college counseling. And they're working closely with the students all day, every day, in addition to collaborating with the faculty on dialectical behavioral therapy skills, DBT, cognitive behavioral therapy skills, CBT, and executive function skills. So there's a lot of emotion regulation and coping skills, distress tolerance. They're looking at interpersonal skills and conflict resolution, as well as mindfulness. So it's really about engaging the students in a day where they dare to be vulnerable, right? I think the learning process can be scary, it can be challenging, and we're constantly trying to find a sweet spot here at Spire where they are challenged, but in a supportive way. It's really important that our students aren't getting bored and therefore disengaged. And it's also important, given the anxiety and potential for depression and withdrawal, that they're not feeling overwhelmed, because that's another reason that they'll avoid school and that we won't see them. So I think that's the part when you talk about like, what is a therapeutic school? I think it's going to be unique for all of our schools. And that's really our approach to be able to meet that particular profile student.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you.
Lauren, it's now your turn.
Sure. So I'm with Therapeutic International School. We are unique in the sense that we do offer day programming, as well as 5-day residential and 7-day residential. So we are an autism first program. We've been in existence for almost, September will be our 5th academic year. And I would say the biggest thing that makes us unique is that we take kids across the spectrum, because we have a very big building. So we have multiple programs. Our founders program are for kiddos who are dually diagnosed with autism and intellectual disability, and will transition eventually to adult care. And then our core program is divided into 2 paths, and kids will graduate either with a commencement credential similar to a CDOS and transition to meaningful employment, or a high school diploma, and hopefully transition to college. But for those that are unable or are not interested in going to college, we will transition them as well to meaningful employment with a high school diploma, with the possibility to then go to college later on in life. I would say the biggest thing that makes, another big thing that makes us unique, similar to Julie, is we are very individualized. So we are truly transdisciplinary, and students are assigned a team across campus life education and clinical services when they enroll with us, and we work off their current IEP while revising it into our ITEP. And we take students, while we are autism first, with co-occurring conditions that range anywhere from anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, to underlying psychiatric conditions, medically fragile students. We have 24-hour nursing, students who are blind and deaf, and students with significant behaviors or suicidal ideations. So we are very sort of blessed to, be able to accommodate the range of the spectrum, which is really rare for programs because we are so large. And as a result, we're accommodating a wide variety of needs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I kind of want to start this discussion off, Dana, with the question of, how should a parent who has a child that is struggling in a district, a district public school, how should a parent think about a special education school and a therapeutic special education school? And how do you know what you need?
Great question. So a lot of times if parents are coming to me, they don't know what they need because they know what they have is not working. And so they're looking for what's next. So that a lot of times that I get parents at that level, and we're at the beginning of looking into programs. So for therapeutic programs, they do tend to be the most expensive. So they do tend to be very difficult to obtain, and unless student really does need it. So typically when we have a student who requires that level of care, we start with evaluations. I always recommend that parents get really good, thorough evaluations through their school district, and if not through their school district, through private evaluators, to find out exactly what they need to do for their child educationally. So if the child has a disability and they do qualify for special education, and it's not automatic, I'm not going to go into all special education, but having a disability doesn't automatically get you special education. But if you do also qualify, then you're entitled to a free appropriate public education. And if your student cannot function in the public school, and for any academic, or not academic, for any educational reasons, then they are entitled to a program that will accommodate them, that does work for them. And so you have to go outside the school district. And you've heard some people talk about state approval. That's a big thing for us here in Connecticut and many states, I'm sure, because school districts will not place a child through their IEP in a school unless it is state approved special education. And state approved special education schools means that you've gone through all the hoops that the state has asked you to do. And I don't, as your attorney, have to prove that your school that your child is in, or the school that you're interested in, is special education, because the state has already said it is. Now, there are a lot of schools that are not certified, they're not state approved, and they can still be special education schools, and your child can still go there. There's a slightly different process if it's not state approved, but it is definitely a possibility. But I always ask parents to first start with looking at state approved schools. But when your child is struggling, that was your original question, you really want to start with evaluations. That's really the most important thing. And that's going to help you get the information that you need. And sometimes if your child, you have a profile for your child, you can call one of these schools and say, these are the issues my child has. Is that the kind of kid that goes to your school? And they'll tell you, you guys are always pretty honest. So, and some people say, well, it's so expensive. Of course, they're going to say they provide it. And that's absolutely not true. I mean, that's not my experience. They're providing very intensive programming, and you cannot do that for absolutely everybody, right? You have to have the right student in the right environment.
And nobody wants to bring a child in and have to ask them to leave because they are not capable of providing the program that they need. Like, no one wants to do that. And honestly, in this environment, no one has to do that, because like lots of these programs are full, and and some have wait lists. So it's not even like they're out there being like, we have to take everyone that can pay our tuition. That is absolutely not the case at all.
I see a lot never has been.
I'm not meaning to imply that it was, but even more so now.
Post-pandemic, I mean, I think,
are we post, Dana? Are we post pandemic?
I'm pretending. That's where I am. That's where I am tonight.
Exactly.
But I'll talk to me tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I'm just saying it always has been that way.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's really important to understand. And I also think for parents that it's also very easy to look at some of these schools and want your child to go there. And say, this is where I think my child can be successful, because you see the school, you see the kids there, and you want that to be your child. And you're saying, I can see that happening. But it's really important to also listen to the professionals. And if the school themselves don't feel like they are a fit for your child, that might be a battle you don't want to take on.
Right.
Now, of course, we're moms. I'm a mom. I've got 5 kids. Don't stand in front of me if I'm trying to get something for my kid. But, it is definitely.
But you bring up an interesting point. It's like, when you're coming from a situation that, is like, is terrible for your child, like your child's not doing well. They're crying every day. They won't go to school, or they will go to school and then they come home early. And it's like, and it's a very, it's a horrible experience. It's one of the worst that a parent can go through. And then you go to a school and you see, Glen Holmes rolling bucolic acres. And then you see at Spire, the all of the integrated support and, and the staff that's right there providing them what they need. Or you go to, to Shrub Oak and you see the, just the fields and the, and the rooms and the, and the campus, the college, campus environment type looking field it is. And it's easy for you to say, I want my child to go here, but that isn't necessarily, it's like all of these 3 schools are tremendous programs for the kids for the kids for whom those programs work for. But that doesn't mean that, which is kind of why we do this, is so that, families can see what the different programs entail. But it is about going to the school and looking at it. And, but you do bring it. I think that's a really, really interesting point, because when you're in a bad situation, almost everything looks like an improvement, and
everything looks good.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily going to be the case. I'd like to kind of, get a little bit back to the sort of topic of this call, which is, what makes you therapeutic? What makes you different than, I'm not picking on them. What makes you different from Eagle Hill? What are you doing that, and Eagle Hill's not doing? Because I think we've established Eagle Hill's a, independent special education school, a very good one, but not a therapeutic school.
It's not therapeutic, but they provide a tremendous number of support. So I do think that's a good analogy. I think that's a good comparison.
So, Tammy, why don't you start with, why you're not, putting aside the dyslexia thing and, everything else.
Sure. And at Spire, although, we will have students that have co-occurring learning disabilities or learning differences, that isn't a primary diagnosis. So we can certainly work with those students who have mild to moderate learning needs. But we're really focused on the students that have manifestations of the anxiety, depression, the school avoidance. And I think having a clinical team here that's really zeroing in on those students' needs to develop emotional regulation skills, those interpersonal skills, to be able to confidently make friends, maintain friends, to be able to experience what we call successful failures, right? Failure is a natural part of life. It is a major learning mechanism, but it doesn't often feel good. But it's helping our students understand the impact and purpose of setbacks and regressions, and how, yes, on the one hand, they're inevitable, but on the other hand, how they can be productive and constructive. And to normalize that experience for our students, to allow them, if you will, to sit in the discomfort of whatever pain or challenge or frustration is in that moment, to realize to get to the other side of that is so empowering and such a wonderful learning experience. And I think between our faculty and our clinicians, that really works to support the students. Our life coaches are the hub of communication for what we call our community of allies. So the clinicians are working closely not only with the faculty all day, every day, but they're communicating regularly with parents, weekly, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times a day, depending upon what's going on. They're communicating with districts as needed. They're communicating with outside providers. So most of our students do maintain their outside therapists and psychiatrists. Maybe they're involved in an IOP or PHP or other programming, and we're working with those individuals to coordinate that care. We just think that's so important because we are a school first and foremost. But we understand that our students are coming in with some deep-rooted issues and probably not best to dig into those between English and history. However, those are manifesting themselves during the school day. And that's really what our clinical team is trying to zero in on. It's so important we have that collaboration with the outside providers though, because there's a lot of great work going on in those sessions weekly and monthly. And whether it's terminology or skills or different dynamics that we can be mindful of, that we can incorporate or remind or help support in our students in this environment, it's really important that they get that holistic approach that Julie was talking about, that they understand that what they're doing outside of here has relevance to here and vice versa. So I hope that helps address some of your question, Christine.
No, that is really, really helpful. You know, I'm going to make a comment, but I'm going to hold it until the end of it. Julie, would you like to explore this next? Like, what's different about Glen Home as opposed to a regular special education school, in quotes?
Sure. And I think your analogy with Eagle Hill is a great one. We commonly have some crossover with sort of more quote unquote traditional boarding schools because their student is sort of on the cusp there. So, you know, I think I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of my presentation, but the wraparound approach that we have in place is really what is setting us apart. So we have 6 clinicians on staff there's a clinician that is available until 9 o'clock at night. Might not be your clinician, but there is some sort of clinical support on site during all of the sort of wake hours. We also have behavioralists. So each of the students also have an additional support of having a behavioralist who's really focused on targeting those key behaviors that we're looking to replace and change. We have the psychiatrist on staff, and again, that everybody is involved in giving input so that we all see the student the most. And so we're able to give input about what to look out for, what we're seeing in this setting, or what we're seeing at a certain time of day. So, our students' goal is really to get to a place like Eagle Hill. And so we're sort of the step before you're ready to launch to a more traditional environment.
Perfect.
If that makes sense.
No, that's perfect. Lauren, what makes you different from a typical special education school?
So I think for us, we take kids who are a bit more complex. So our clinical services are quite hefty. While we do have a day program, we are built as a residential facility, and the bulk of our population live with us 365 days of the year, 24/7. We never close. So clinically, you know, we have the only consulting clinician is a psychiatrist. And then on our clinical team, we run the gamut from, you know, OT-PT speech to art and music therapists, psychology, mental health clinicians, BCBAs, social workers, clinical social workers, 24-hour health and wellness. So for us, we are highly therapeutic. And I would say the biggest thing about us is we always deliver the services that are rendered on your current IEP, but we typically do, when we evaluate you over the first 8 weeks, we typically increase the service delivery, and there's no cap on services for us. So for us, you know, we look at the child from the lens of, you know, safety and security first, and then whether we can treat you clinically, educationally, and, you know, with a life skills perspective, all while, you know, incorporating the clinical services throughout not only the education day, but after school and on the weekends as well, and really grouping that together.
So just to summarize, you know, I think what I heard all 3 of you say, the word that I heard all 3 of you use is clinical. So the difference between, you know, as I think about, you know, like what's the difference between a typical special education school, a typical independent special education school, and what you guys are doing on the therapeutic front is the clinical services that are being provided to the student to either 1, support a change in behavior, or 2, support a change in, I wrote down feelings, but, you know, but that's kind of, you know, I mean, there's probably a better word than that, but
emotional control.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of, I think, like what I've got. I think we're done and we can turn off the call. That's sort of what I gathered from, from your sort of, summary of that. Dana, can you touch on, as you like think about, legally how this plays out in an outplacement scenario? There's like, not for all these schools, but there's the educational piece, there's the clinical piece, which borders on medical, and then there's the residential piece. And how do those three things kind of interrelate with each other? And then, how do you move from one to the other, or when do you decide to do that? That's a lot of question, but
No, but I know exactly what you're asking.
Yeah.
And, when we're looking for a therapeutic school for a child, and you're asking what makes it different from like an Eagle Hill. Yes, the clinical component absolutely makes a difference. And it's their, as you said, they're working on some form of emotional control on some level there, or behaviors of some kind. And when children have emotional issues that require a therapeutic setting, those emotional issues or those therapeutic needs present differently. So some children may internalize, some may externalize. Some children will pick up every behavior around them. Some won't notice everyone around them. So that is what makes these schools different. You have to go and check the environments and see, what some schools don't allow any behaviors. If you have one meltdown, you're out, and then others, it's hard to get to the academics because that's all we're handling, or all they're handling are the behaviors. So it really is about the specific need of the child. So not all therapeutic schools are the same. And so again, as a family, as a parent, when you are looking for a therapeutic school, you're looking for more intensive, more structured services throughout the day that genuinely wrap around. And that a wraparound doesn't mean they consult with each other once a week over lunch. That's not what that wraparound is. This is real wraparound.
Fully integrated. No, it's fully integrated. Every piece of it is fully integrated. Every piece of the ABA is integrated into every component of the child's day, with every provider and every teacher and every activity.
Exactly. And like Julie said at Glen Home, when you have lunch, there's somebody there. So if you have an interaction with your friend, they can jump in, and it's natural and it's normal, and it takes tremendous training and different training than just teaching. And so, there's a tremendous amount of support. So if your child requires that, if that's the level that you're looking at, then that's what's considered therapeutic. And yes, so there are several different components. There's the academic component, the therapeutic component, and sometimes the residential, depending on the program that you're looking at.
Right.
And it's really important to remember that education is not just academics.
That's right.
Not just academics. Education includes social emotional pieces,
behavioral
pieces, daily living skills. Like there's a lot that comes into play. And so if you're looking at the most extreme, say a residential school, I'll start with the least extreme. So you're talking about a day school and that level of support for, again, you're starting with evaluations, and you're looking, your child is in, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but you're starting with evaluations because you want to get the information. What do they need? Do they need this level of support? And you can get that information through a neuropsychological evaluation as well as a psychiatric evaluation. But
there's some element, I think, what you're saying, Dana, is, when you're looking for that therapeutic, that sort of therapeutic piece, and we'll talk about the day program, you're looking for a component of support that is not just provided through an Orton Gillingham, one-on-one.
Right.
No, exactly. That might be part of it, but there are, behaviors and feelings and, manifestations that are outside of, a reading, a dyslexia,
dysgraphia. They go well beyond reading frustration. Yes.
Right.
I mean, and there are kids who have behaviors who don't need a therapeutic school. mean, there
Absolutely.
are children who have a lot of behaviors and do not require a therapeutic environment. So it is very individualized and specialized. And
it's so hard for a parent to like, because when you're a parent, it's like, you're like, here I am, and this environment's not working. How do I know what environment is going to work? Is it like, do I take one step? Do I need to take 2 steps? Like, do I need to take 3 steps? Like, how many steps do I need to take? Because you don't want to take, like, you don't want to not
and the
take,
reality is your child is always changing, and your
Right.
child is always growing,
Right.
and their needs are always changing.
Right.
And the federal law makes us talk about this at least once a year. So, it can be very overwhelming. But so when you want this, so you find a school, sometimes the schools are on board. Sometimes your public school is going to come to that meeting and say, so here I have a few options for you that we'd like you to look at. And, and it's funny because I've had clients who go both ways in similar situations where the school comes in and says, I've got a private school for you. And some parents are thrilled and some are like, over my dead body.
Right.
That's not happening.
Right.
So, it's also not necessarily coveted by everybody.
Right.
So not everyone, you also have to keep in mind a lot of philosophies. And so when you're sitting at that PPT or that IEP meeting and you're talking about what your child needs, it really has to focus on your child and bring it back to them rather than somebody else's educational philosophy.
Right.
So, somebody thinks that a child should be included all the time, 24/7. I personally
that's not appropriate for everybody.
It's not. Not every child learns through osmosis because they're in a room, So, but because you guys are providing so many of these services, it costs more. You can't have classrooms of 5 children with 5 adults in some capacity responsible for them without it costing a lot. So you really,
or the clinical support. The clinical
support is so and the tuitions are usually divided between clinical and academic. And so for, if your child is placed there through your IEP, you're not paying for any of this. The school district is paying for it and they're transporting and they're doing all of that. Where the tuition breakup comes into place is when parents are not in agreement with their school district and they are trying to come to some form of an agreement and they're trying to convince their school district to pay for the program. And so a lot of school districts are going to say, well, maybe we'll pay for the academic piece, but we don't believe they need the therapeutic piece. Or when it comes to residential programs, we don't need the residential component.
Right.
Unfortunately, in Connecticut, we don't have great case law. So meaning that we don't have, it's not easy to demonstrate that a child needs those residential components. Right. So if your child requires help with daily living skills, that's a great need for residential because you can't teach a child how to manage their morning routine unless you're there for it. Right. So for them to be fully independent, for some children, they have to learn that they have to wash their clothes. They have to learn that they need to shower so many times a week. They have to learn these things. And so those are very difficult skills to teach if you are not there for when the activity is happening. Right. So that's like an obvious reason for needing the residential. Another reason for requiring a residential would be that it's not within driving distance. If the school that is right for your child is over 2 hours away, I don't see how you're going to go there. Now in our state, if it's about an hour, the commute, that's about the cutoff. That's when we say that's too much. Between 45 minutes and an hour, that's too much. But schools are going to look for alternatives closer to them or try to create something closer to them. But I have had children go to schools, have their school districts fund the residential component because they can't get them there otherwise. So that can be a reason for residential. And for children who just need that level of intensity, they need it all the time. And, I think about how many times we go to PBT or IEP meetings and the school's seeing one thing and the parent is seeing something completely different. Right. That's why you need a residential program.
Right. Absolutely.
So you can see the whole child.
Can each of the 3 of you Julie, Lauren, and Tammy, talk about that sort of, residential day, kind of support, because you've definitely, all three of you have seen students where you're like, you need to step up or step down from from your particular program. So, can you talk about what, would make you, like Tammy, in your case, you're providing a very, we'll start with you. You're providing a very, comprehensive, the most comprehensive therapeutic day program, in this area. And you're seeing a kid, what would cause you to say, I think this child needs a level up of, of the support that we're providing?
Sure. No, it's a great question. So, for Spire, we really serve students in sort of a variety of areas, depending upon where their symptoms lie. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, none of us are sort of a one size fits all, and we all have our niche. And you had mentioned, yes, we don't want to waste precious money, time, or confidence of a child or a family by being, misplaced. And so for Spire in particular, we're really looking for a student that's more of an internalizer, sort of that fragile imploder, if you will. Low self-confidence, tends to internalize their emotions and not externalizing, not outward behaviors or aggression, for example. But oftentimes we'll have students that were like that at one point in their lives. They've gone away to programs. Maybe they have been in therapeutic boarding schools, or they've been in residential treatment centers, and they're doing a step down to be able to return maybe to their local private or public school.
Right.
So that's where a day environment can be helpful in terms of a step down that's local to home, that's local to their district, but they're not quite ready for, the public school yet. And they want to be able to continue to work in some of those skills in a smaller, more nurturing social milieu. On the other hand, we might have students that are just starting to kind of ramp up. We're not really sure where it's going. We want to be able to sort of nip it in the bud, if you will. And so districts will work with families if it's appropriate. They'll come to Spire. We're really working aggressively on those skills and thinking about what can we do in terms of managing goals in the short and long term to be able to think about that student returning to district or successfully graduating from Spire and moving on to college. And so you're looking at sort of catching something early that might turn into something bigger. But so too, we'll have students that, we think is going to be a good fit. And then you're right, Dana, students change, right? They're changing daily, weekly, monthly, biochemically, massively between middle school and high school years. Things can look really different, particularly if there's medication changes, home dynamic changes. So things can ramp up, and then we realize we're just not enough. Whether things are escalating psychiatrically, there's self-harm issues, there's aggression, volatility, maybe eating issues have ramped up, or maybe the home dynamic, it just isn't conducive to a day school environment. And so I really want to highlight, with Spire being a day school, it's important that we're truly allied with the families, right? This is a whole system's worth of collaborative effort. It's not just about sending your child to school and getting them fixed. They're not broken. And it's the whole system, right, that collaboratively is going to be working together to support this child. So too, the child's doing a lot of hard work here, and the family has to do a lot of hard work to understand and respect that child's space and the changes that they're making.
And the work that the child's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. How does that fit into the home life? And so if we're truly collaborative with the families and working on that together, it works very well. There's a lot of communication there. There's a lot of healthful exchange. Students can grow and individualize in both of those environments, and the environments can mold around them and evolve. Sometimes that's not the case, right? Sometimes things are just very tough in the home world. And you had described that we might see a very different student than what parents see at home. And this sometimes does happen. We see a student here that's engaged and attending and successful and productive, still working on skills, no doubt about it.
Right.
But perhaps that student at home is defiant, is oppositional, is aggressive, is rule breaking, closes themselves in their bedrooms and doesn't come out until they go to school. And so the parents are really struggling. Even though we see a different child, then we have to be able to understand that parent's perspective and to realize that, yes, what's going on at home is not something that we can touch. That's not something that, unfortunately, the day school environment is being effective with. And then we're having those discussions about maybe we're looking at a residential placement.
Perfect. Julie, can you talk a little bit about how, you often, are, you serve students that are coming to you from, a therapeutic day program, or coming to you from a a wilderness program or an RTC or something like that. Talk about how that, how you look at those students and, moving them, stepping up, whatever they need in that context.
Sure. So we see sort of all of that. And I would say our average age is 16. And so we have students that have tried the therapeutic day school and have tried, RTCs or higher level of care than therapeutic boarding school, and are now transitioning back to a lower level of care. And so we often have, a lot of our students end up staying with us and graduating from high school, because that's sort of the natural next step. I think one of the biggest, and Tammy touched on it, is the family piece, and really supporting the family. Our goal is for this student to be successful, not just in our structured environment. That could be easy in some ways. I mean, it's set up for success. And our students thrive on structure and consistency. Right. So
it's to be able to generalize that behavior outside of the environment.
Exactly. And we work very closely with families to teach them the skills that we're teaching our staff and that we're teaching the students, so that when they're home, they can generalize those skills to the home environment. But we too see that sometimes, just like Dana said, kids change, and you see, different things emerge in different students as they get older and as, they progress in maturity. And so there are times that we see, we have to recommend a higher level of care, a wilderness program for a period of time before a student's ready to sort of transition back. I hope that answered the question.
No, that's perfect. No, that's perfect. Lauren, can you talk, because you have kind of, like not a hybrid program, but you offer a day program, you offer 5-day boarding, you offer 7-day boarding, and clearly we're not talking about the founders program here. We're talking about, like a student that might be able to, like a student that might be able to move between, a 7, a 5, and possibly a day, depending on what their circumstances are. Talk a little bit about, like why a student would be, the difference between a residential and a day student at Shrub Oak, and then even between a 5 and a 7-day, boarding student.
Sure. So our programs are very fluid. Students can come to us locally as a day student and either be a 5 or a 7-day boarder. I think that parents actually make the decision to become 5 or 7-day boarders to really hone in on socialization and those life skills, because they're forming bonds with their peers. They're feeling like they can become more independent. They're honing in on their ADLs. And that's something that they may not have had the ability to do at home for many reasons. I think a lot of kids and a lot of parents, I mean, I'm a parent of 2 myself, it's easier to tie my kids' shoes to get them out of the door within 5 minutes than have them, have me be patient as a mother and say it's okay and we take an hour to do that. So for us, I think that's definitely the biggest, bonus of our program. Students who are 5-day boarders, I think it takes a specific type of student to be that individual. I personally have, not certain feelings. I think in the admissions process, I just feel like, we're all about having students progress, and 5-day boarding is really hard in our population. I mean, we have 70 kids and we have 3 or 4 kids who actually successfully do it out of 5. So that's a conversation that we have with the family. It's something that
because of the change, it's like the change is significant,
it is. And the kids who come to us, the 5 kids who come to us with 5-day boarding, 3 out of the 5 are college bound, and Monday's really hard, so it's really, really hard. So I don't necessarily love that. I think it's a really good option for families, but I also believe that, 7-day boarding and kind of bringing home when you can is better. So
it's like the whole being half pregnant thing, it's like,
correct.
yeah, it's a little, whatever. But that's super, super helpful. I think that it is, it's great that you offer that gamut of programming and, and how, just so parents have, the option, because but it is true that, I mean, Dana, I know that you and have been through this, I have going through it myself. It's like, sometimes things are, they're not teachable, in a home environment. It's like they really are not, whether they are sort of independent living skills or they are, any other, type of skill that, it's like they're just not transferable in a home environment, particularly when you're like, I'll just do it for you. I'll just get it for you. I'll just do whatever. I'll just wake you up because I can't be late either. So I have to get you out of the door,
Yeah. And to that point, Christine, I mean, I worked at a residential school. I that does not make me, competent to teach my child in my home.
Right,
It's just,
right.
it is a different ball game.
Yeah, totally. A completely different ball game. This has been this has been absolutely just a tremendous program this evening. I'm really, really excited, that we've had this discussion. It's been, really, really engaging. What would I'm really, really interested in exploring sort of, how districts look from each of your perspectives, how school districts look at each one of your programs in terms of, placing a student there, keeping them there, maybe, stepping them up to your program or stepping them down. How are school districts looking at therapeutic schools, these days? Who went last? That was Lauren. Tammy, why don't you go? Why don't you start with this? And then Dana, we'll go Tammy, we'll go Julie, we'll go Lauren, and then Dana, you can wrap up.
I might pipe.
You should totally pipe. Just saying. Keep your mute off. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for Spire, I think districts are thinking, we have a student that's school avoidant. That's generally the first thing that's getting, the school's attention. They're thinking, Spire, we have a bright, capable student that is having social anxiety or some sort of avoidance about something happening in that public school, sort of milieu. So whether it's just big, loud, there's bullying going on, academics, they're just feeling overwhelmed, they need more individualized attention. And so again, I think they're thinking about Spire in terms of, we have a fragile student who is not behavioral in the sense that they're not externalizing the aggression, they're not runners, they're not acute psychiatrically in terms of being, sort of inevitable self-harm, suicidality, homicidality. They're capable in the classroom, but they need to be nurtured. They need to be supported in a smaller environment that is quieter and calmer and more individualized.
And more manageable.
And manageable, right? That the students truly feel like there's the communication and the individualized care and support for that student, where they also can be challenged. I think that's the biggest thing, is that, some of the therapeutic schools really do, and understandably so, remove sort of the rigor of the academics, because that's not the priority. And I understand and appreciate that. At Spire, however, for our particular profile student, that is very important. And that is part of their therapeutic adventure, if you will. It's going to be part of the work that they do and the confidence that they build. And so it's important for us to be able to, again, offer that really rigorous academic program to keep that student engaged, to get them back into school, to help them realize that what they're capable of is so much greater than what they might be currently producing. But that doesn't mean that we peel away those layers of accountability and opportunity. They can go there, but they just need the right understanding and support and skills.
Perfect. I forgot what order that was. Julie?
Sure. So we, like Spire, we are accredited by the state of Connecticut. We're also accredited by 5 other states. So we probably work with about 40 to 50 different school districts. And so we are a true collaborator, and the school districts are really looking at a school like Glen because they can't meet the students' needs. The parents are struggling with the students at home. The students are having issues with school refusal or school avoidance, or they come to school and they just are not they're just not performing. They're not available for education. And so they need that, different approach, a smaller class size, a therapist that meets with them on a regular basis, that individualized approach. And so they just don't fit into that.
Someone to intervene in a social situation at a lunch.
Exactly. The kids are struggling socially. They don't have a peer group. They don't have a single friend. And that's sort of a common denominator of a lot of kids, when they first come to Glen Home, they're really struggling socially. And so it's that whole picture that the school district is just saying, this kid needs more than what we can offer.
Yeah.
Perfect. Dana.
Oh, I was going to say, just jump in because you're talking about sorry, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Just go.
That's okay. Lauren, go ahead.
Sure. So
our district's looking at you. You deal with, not a lot of different states as well, much like Glen Home. So,
Exactly. So unlike Glen Home, Shrub Oak is not accredited in the state of New York. And we did so for multiple reasons. However, we are, a non-public school provider in the state of Washington. 75% of our students actually are attending Shrub Oak, and they are directly placed by school districts, either through consultants, family referrals, or straight up district referrals. And I think that makes us really unique because, as Julie had mentioned, we're servicing the needs of individuals that their districts simply cannot provide the level of therapeutic support that those students need round the clock, because we are 365 24/7. And regardless of the program that you're in at Shrub Oak, you still require that level of support. So we are really grateful that districts have been reaching out to us and using us as a resource for their children. And we hope to kind of form more relationships. And I think the biggest thing that districts are coming to us to, at least right now, is our 24-hour nursing, because we are able to provide support for kids who have seizure disorders or diabetes and kids with rare genetic conditions that districts can't provide in a big setting.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And that's where I'll jump in.
That's right.
There's also because that brings us to the medical component. And school districts are not obligated to provide medical care. So I just want to say that because I could never explain it, even if you let me talk the whole hour, I couldn't explain it like really clearly. So I just want parents to understand that there is a medical component and an educational component, and they overlap, but they're not always both the school's responsibility. So that is something to take into consideration. Also, what I was going to say about you two is one of the things that we look for in a therapeutic school and that public schools look for is their goal to get the child back to the public school. And that's what the public school wants. And what the parents want is the kid going to not go back to public school until they're ready? You're like, yeah, I would love to have my kid take the bus and go to prom.
Everybody wants the kid to go to public school. Like
nobody
wants their kid, yes.
I don't know how that image came out there, but somehow that image is out there that we're all want these wonderful private schools, and you are wonderful. And I did want them because I had a child.
And you want them when you need them.
But you want them when you need them. Exactly. And so, that's another thing for parents to look into. And then Lauren, with your school, I mean, you get a lot of kids who are probably need it for their entire education from once they get there. And so when I'm looking at a school like yours, the public school is looking at, oh my gosh, when we send this kid, we are probably going to be committed for the rest of it. So when do we have to send them, And again, that's why I say, I get calls from parents sometimes in first, second grade, and they say, look, we know our child is going to require a therapeutic placement or a more structured placement or whatever it is by sixth grade. So, what do we need to do to make sure we're in the best position to do that?
Yeah.
And, and it, because you do need to bring the public school along with you on that journey sometimes to make sure that they are on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting, sort of conundrum that, the parents, find themselves in is, is needing to make that, that call, but knowing that once they make it, it's like for a lot of kids, like that's the placement, that's the type of environment that they're going to need to, to be in,
And I don't think some people realize that as a parent, at least for me, I'll speak for me.
Mhm.
When my child finally got to a residential therapeutic placement, it is both a relief and horrifying
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
the same time,
Yeah. Yep.
because you do have that moment where you're like, that's the kind of care my kid needs,
Right.
you know?
Right. So nobody, I mean, is like, woohoo, like it's not like that, it really isn't. So I think that's really, really tremendous. It's just about 8:05, and I wanted to thank all of our participants for this, for joining us this evening, and our panelists for this incredible, this incredible discussion. I mean, honestly, like this is like one of the best webinars yet, in my view, because it's just like such a, a flowing and interesting conversation. And I've learned so much about, all of your 3 programs. And Dana, I always learn when I talk to you, whether it's on text or phone or whatever it is. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I hope you have a great one, and please join us for our next webinar on March 9th, which is Understanding Residential Outplacement, where we will delve into all the stuff that Dana mentioned in like just minute, excruciating detail, and hopefully answer some questions for everyone. But thank you all for joining us this evening, and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.